everyone. I'm Ashley Easter, and I'm so glad that you've decided to join us for the 30 Days of Courage Challenge. I am the founder and executive director of Courage 365, the nonprofit that is putting on this 30 Days of Courage Challenge. And from myself and from the board, I just want to welcome you all here. We have already had some great interviews, and we are going to have another one tonight. So make sure you watch not only this amazing interview that's about to come up, but we also are going to be announcing the prize winner for the first week's challenge after the interview. So you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that. I've seen so many pictures going up with your self-affirmation vision boards. You've really done a great job, and we've selected a winner, and I can't wait to tell you who that is. So make sure you hang on to the very end. And if this is the first time you're tuning in and getting to know Courage 365, we are here to support survivors and to educate advocates. That is the work that we do. We've been doing this for about 5 years now. And while in the past we've had in-person conferences called the Courage Conference, this year, because of COVID, we decided to bring it online, but it's been just as good as an in-person event with our amazing speakers. And we are 100% donor supported. We are funded and run by donors. So if you would like to help us bring in more amazing speakers, more free offerings for survivors, you can go to courage365.org/donate, and you can become a monthly donor, and you can help us put out this valuable information for survivors. Now, we're going to be doing an interview style conversation, but after I ask my questions, it's going to be time for you to ask your questions. So make sure during this live video that you are dropping your questions in the comments, because my husband Will is going to be screening those questions. He's going to give me those, and our guest, Johnathon Schaech, is going to be answering those live questions for you. My last announcement before we dig into the interview is on Saturday, we are going to be having our first support discussion group meeting through Zoom. It's going to be a video call. It's going to be a way to really engage with other survivors and advocates who are in this group. That's going to be 1:00 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Look out for more details in the group. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you my friend and survivor advocate, Johnathon Schaech. Hey, Johnathon, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I am so good. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Really, really appreciate that.
Oh, it was an honor to be asked to have a conversation with you, because it's been, what was it, last year that we did the 50th anniversary for SNAP?
Yeah, I think it was last year. Was the 30
Oh,
some
it was, it
years.
was some,
It was a
it was,
big one. It was a
was
big
it,
one. And yeah, so I think we met in person the first time there. If you all are not familiar with SNAP, it's Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests. Both Johnathon and I are on the board. And yeah, it's just a wonderful organization. But yeah, John, it's been so great getting to know you. And yeah, I think probably a lot of people tuning in already know who you are, but I'm going to go ahead and just read a little bio. So if anybody who's living under a rock maybe hasn't heard your name, they can get to know you a little bit. So this is Johnathon Schaech's bio. Over the last 25 years, Johnathon has starred in over 160 Hollywood productions. In 2018, Johnathon came forward with his story of molestation by director Franco Zeffirelli. When he was a young actor, he spoke, this happened, and he spoke to People magazine. Johnathon now uses activism to support other survivors of abuse in the wake of the Me Too movement. Johnathon, you have such a courageous story, and that is a big reason why I wanted to bring you on tonight. And I would just love for you to share a little bit of that background with us. I know that a lot of our survivors here have come from religious backgrounds, and I know that wasn't exactly your scenario, but you did grow up Catholic, and the abuser was a religious person. Could you just tell us a little bit about your story, where you came from, how you got into acting, and then this fateful moment?
Okay, so I was raised Catholic. My father I grew up in Baltimore. My father was a Baltimore City police officer. he he raised me in a Catholic church. We would go to school, Catholic school, and I literally was raised on the East Coast of Baltimore, but on the outskirts, about 30 minutes outside. And I was raised Catholic, and I I had a really hard time when I was growing up because I was dyslexic. So, and I know.
Me too.
So when I went into a school, it was like I could never get in front of people and I could never read, and that just was so petrifying. But I somehow managed to do well in my schoolwork, and I got into college. But when I got to college, I literally remember saying to myself, I can't read these textbooks. These textbooks are incredibly laborious, and I just can't get through them. My roommate at the time was he was from Africa. English wasn't his first language, and he had a really he could read any textbook with no problem, and he actually read for me sometimes. He was like, "What is wrong? I don't understand." I was
Right.
like, I can't, it can't get in me." And I took one acting class in college at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and it was with Sam McGrady. And then I literally said to myself, I could do this.
Yeah.
This this is something that I have an ability to play.
Right.
I thought, man, I I'm going to go out to Hollywood. So I was going to go 3,000 miles and pursue this dream or this thought or this feeling that I had inside. So if we talk about courage, that was my biggest courage moment of my life, is making that big decision that I was going to leave, my family and move out and pursue something that no one around me had any success in it whatsoever.
Right.
So I moved all the way across to Los Angeles. And when I got there, I had a moment where I was sitting down at the Fiddler Cafe, and Peter Savick, who was Madonna's hairdresser, walked up to me and he said, "You could model." And I remember thinking to myself, like, well, this guy has a robe on, had earrings all the way down his side, little goatee, spoke in a foreign language, and I was just like, "Oh wow, what are you?" Like and he took me to Wilhelmina, and then I started to model. But when I went to Wilhelmina, I asked them for an acting teacher that could teach me how to act, because I had this feeling that I wanted to be more than just the way I looked. I was
Right.
starting to realize that people looked at me in a certain way, and I could. It was like they were attracted to me, and I could do things and smile, and it was okay and make everything all right.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to be able to give the light that was inside me out.
Right.
And I found an acting teacher named Roy London, and Roy London was magnificent. I mean, I went in that class. Gina Davis was there, Michelle Pfeiffer, Brad Pitt. Um, it was an endless list of people that weren't necessarily. Some of them were famous, but they were going to become very famous.
Right.
Um, I just remember thinking, wow, I just liked the process of identifying self,
Mm.
and I jumped into it wholeheartedly. And I was blessed to get a couple commercials, and they paid my way out there in Los Angeles. And I told myself that I shouldn't pursue acting until I was ready to actually do the job, because if I was hired and I was put in front of somebody, I felt like I had to be like, I had to get a degree. So
Right.
I was trained for about 3 years with Roy and other teachers in Los Angeles. And then my roommate came home, and my roommate said to me, there's an open call. So in other words, like, there was not through agencies, not through managers, like anyone could go and audition for this Franco Zeffirelli movie. Now, this Franco Zeffirelli movie was a period piece. Franco had did films like Romeo and Juliet, where he cast two unknown actors, and this is how he did this. This is his MO. This is how he worked everything. And I went in for the audition. My roommate and I both went in. I think I went 2 or 3 times in Los Angeles, and then there was two actors that they asked to screen test in Los Angeles. I mean, in Cinecittà in Rome. One was me, and one was my roommate.
Wow.
And of all the hundreds of people, it was me and my roommate, Mike Wilson. And there were some actors from I think there was two actors from New York, there was two actors from England, and there was two Italian actors, and we all auditioned in front of one another.
Mm-hmm.
I remember I flew all the way to Rome. This is 1992. I flew
Mm,
to Rome. I had been to France before, but I had never experienced a screen test before of this nature.
right.
Like
Right.
it was a really big deal, and they presented us. They took us to museums in Rome where Franco's work was there, his art was there. Um,
Mm,
they took us in the Vatican. I remember seeing the Sistine Chapel with no one else around.
wow.
Uh, he had access to the Vatican like nobody's business. He did a
Wow.
movie called Jesus of Nazareth. That when I grew up, my family that was Jesus.
Right.
Jesus is next to us. Robert, I think his Powell is his last name. He was Jesus. That was
Right.
our like that.
Yeah.
Catholics love that movie, and I was raised Catholic, so it was like I was I was just like in my element. This
Yeah.
is what I was supposed to do. I felt like here I am. I left all the sanctity and safety of my home, my
Mm,
family, and I finally was making something of myself. But I remember getting there, and it was like I had a lot of. I mean, I was like it was different time zone, so I was you
right.
know, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for a run, and I went to the park, and I ran through the park, and this actually happened. I was running, and I felt something looking upon me, like
Mm,
something was there in that park, and I was like, what is this? What is going
right.
on? I looked up, and there was a wolf on the hillside.
Wow. Wow.
It was a great big dog, and I was just like, oh my god, what is that? And I remember running, and it followed me along a little bit, and then I came to a sign that said it was the zoo. It was the
Mm.
Rome's zoo. I was like, oh, so he's on the other side of this gate. Oh, this is okay. So I get up, I go to the audition, not the audition, screen test. They had cameras there. We had to hit a mark. We were on the stage. I had to do a Death of a Salesman play. I was Biff. I was really good at it. Uh, I think that was my only. I always told myself that that was the one thing I think that had won me the role was that
Mm,
I was American, and I was as American gets, and the
right.
English were proper because they were awesome.
Yeah.
They were phenomenal actors. They could hit their mark and cry on a dime, and it was just they're
Yeah.
beautiful to watch. And so after the screen test, I mean, I had my roommate there. We were competing against each other. He
Uh-huh.
would take us to dinners through these days, and it was like this. It was like this extravaganza. To
Right.
put it.
A lot of pomp and circumstance happening around him.
And after that screen test, I was exhausted. I remember him telling me that the camera really loved me,
Hmm.
and that I did a really good job. Well, I
Mm,
went to sleep that evening in my hotel room, and Franco came in the room.
mm,
He he came unannounced. He came on his own, and he was very drunk.
mm.
That's where that all took place. That's
Wow.
what happened. It was the very first screen test that I had ever had, and I
Wow.
know all this because as I read on Twitter
Mm,
that Rose was molested by Harvey Weinstein, and when I was reading about her dynamics and the power dynamics, sexual violence, I've always thought it was like a guy jumps out of a bush, and
right.
that was what that was. So I compartmentalized what had happened to me. I put it
Yeah.
in a certain, it was trauma, but it was all part of this world that I kind of didn't want to look at.
Yeah.
Um, and then I learned by speaking out exactly what had happened to me.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow. And I want to get into kind of the speaking out process. But before we get there, first of all, thank you for sharing that story. And I'm just thinking of you as a young actor, not being with family, being in another country, having like this opportunity for a career of a lifetime, and the person that you've trusted to open this opportunity up for you is the same person who comes in your room at night, and that's a really terrifying thing. And I hate that that happened to you. And I also want to just applaud your courage for speaking out. And I want to dive into that in a minute. But in that aftermath, before you got to the place in 2017 where you began speaking about it, what were some of the things that went through your head? I would imagine this would be a confusing time. Was it something that you knew right away? Did you try to shove it down, numb it? Like what was your experience after that night?
I was scared to death. I didn't know that I was molested. I thought that
Mm-hmm.
it was like it was an unknowing romantic thing, a gesture that he was
Right.
trying to place upon me, and I was very confused. And as a male survivor, and if there's other male survivors, there's always other things that happen that are unique, and
Sure.
ejaculation and infection. And
Sure.
it happened very quickly. It was also almost like an, uh, I can't never get the words right, but it was a feeling of rush and anxiety
Right.
that made me have an orgasm, which I
Right.
didn't understand what it was.
Yeah.
And parts of my body had never been touched in certain ways like that. I
Hmm.
was scared to move. I
Yeah.
told him no. I pushed him aside, and all that rush and all that, the word is excitement. There
Right.
was this moment. Now,
Hmm.
through my trauma therapy, I understand that that's what people do. That was the only thing I really could do. If I was to
Right.
harm him, what would have happened? I don't even know
Sure.
what would happen. But
You
I
could
didn't
have
even
been
think about it.
violent or something. Yeah. Hmm.
So the lack of violence is really what was the
Right.
trauma
Right.
that I didn't by you know fight for my life. Because
Right.
I think to myself all along, well, let's see what that was. And it confused my sexuality for a really long time. Now I'm
Mm.
an actor, so I jumped into roles where I could explore myself and play
Sure.
dynamics, but I always had this fracture,
Mm.
this thing that I just couldn't quite get, and it haunted me for a really long time, and I could not identify what it was. Even even in my sobriety, even with really expensive therapists,
Hmm.
and doctors, they all would say like you were sexually abused, and I'd be like, no, it's
Right.
impossible. Like, look
Right.
at me. I'm a beast.
Right.
Like, I'm a fighter. I'm raised by a fighter. I'm a fighter. It's just not going to happen. And then,
Right.
so, when hearing all the survivors during Me Too really
Yeah.
helped me identify it, because the power dynamics had never been talked about like that.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
hit me just like Rose's story. I had worked, so right after in 92,
Hmm.
when that happened, I went back to Los Angeles and I got offered the part. Okay, so
Mm.
but I got also offered a part on General Hospital. So I had to make a decision whether I wanted to do this one or this one. And
Hmm.
I finally got a manager that he kind of helped me try to figure out what it was. Now, I thought, well, here I'm going to go back into this world of Zeffirelli, but he was drunk.
Mm.
And he, I felt like I knew what he was up to and was just not
Right.
okay anymore. And I would tell him that.
Yeah.
And 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 they were going to put me in school before they brought me to Rome, and I was waiting for him to do this again. And
Right.
I started to see my co-star, which kept me out of my room. He may have visited my room. It was like literally this dance that I did for literally 6 months to stay
Wow.
away from, and my I have a big heart, and I wanted him to see that so that he wouldn't harm me in any way anymore. Like,
Right.
we're not going to
Right.
go down that road anymore. And I made the movie. And during the course of it, I had my acting teacher on the phone. Even though I was on the set in Rome, he would answer my phone call at any time.
Mm.
Uh, he told me I didn't need to do anything that I didn't want to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I made the movie. And Franco's known for being a real jerk. He
Yeah.
drinks a lot. When he drinks a lot, he's abusive. He was abusive to everyone on the set.
Mm.
And I'd have to stand up for them, and they sometimes would stand up for me. But he was a powerful man in
Right.
a place
Right.
where that was it. Like, no
Yeah.
one else. You know, my father even told me that he had threatened me at certain times because of the
Mm.
mafia and all this. I just can't remember any of that, but that's. So when I went through that experience, I came back to Los Angeles, and I was hurting. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
painful. Everything that I gave up and sacrificed to do, it was like it was horrible. I didn't want to do
Mm,
this anymore. My every experience was going to be this traumatic, and like, why would I put myself through this torture?
right.
And my acting teacher, August 8th, 1993, he died. He died of AIDS,
Mm,
and I had no idea he was on his deathbed during the course of making this movie. None.
wow.
He kept it from me because he was trying to give me strength, and I was I was close to committing. I like there was times where I really felt like I was going to commit suicide. Like that was
Mm,
the solution
yeah.
that I possibly could have. Um, and then my other roommate, was skydiving at the time, and he said, "Why don't you come skydive with me?" And I thought, well, that scares me,
Mm,
right? That's scary. That was scary, and I thought, well, if I don't want to pull the ripcord, I cannot pull the ripcord, and that's one way that I can actually get out of this situation
mm,
if I really don't want to take my life. And I wound up jumping like 30 times. And it was, I was smoking a lot of weed at the time. I was drinking a great deal. I was trying to escape whatever that was. And then what was the thing that broke me was
mm,
that Franco was so upset with me that we
yeah.
had this experience and we weren't lovers, and I was an asshole and he was an asshole, and we fought. And he decided that he would not allow me to loop my lines. So in other words, the the character you would see, my voice wouldn't be on that character. And I studied really hard to have that voice. And he
Wow.
took it away.
So he
And
literally took your voice away, not only metaphorically with the abuse scenarios, but also literally took your voice away for the film. Wow. Wow. Mm.
so there's a physical element to that. Isn't it crazy? That's why it's so important for me to share with survivors.
Yes.
So um so I was, I didn't know what to do, but there was something in me. I I had this, and I was around my manager and Ellen DeGeneres,
Mm.
and she was incredibly courageous. I mean, here she was hiding her sexuality, and she would ask me to walk her on the red carpet. We would be arm in arm because she didn't want anyone to know that she was gay because they wouldn't accept her for that.
Right. Right.
And that these people in my life at that time, they gave me enough courage, and my agent at the time, Eileen Feldman, gave me opportunity, and it stemmed probably from Zeffirelli film, but also because I was still this guy who won the Zeffirelli. Like,
Right.
nothing Franco gave me led to me getting anything else ever.
Right.
Not that thing, nothing. Um, but I had this fight, and I went in and I won a role opposite Rose McGowan. Now, Rose was her first film she had ever done, and it was for Greg Araki. It was called The Doom Generation. I played Xavier Red. Um, it's a very popular film in the LGBT community.
Mhm.
It was groundbreaking. It was a great experience, and it was with Jimmy Duvall, had the same birthday as me. It was during the earthquake. So that's the context. When I saw Me Too and I
Hmm.
read the story, that's where I was. I
Wow.
was right there. Like it kept triggering me. Like that's my story.
Mm.
And
It's so interesting that maybe serendipitous is the word, but that you had worked with Rose McGowan, and so you knew her, and she was somebody that you were familiar with, and she was one of the ones who really projected the Me Too movement kind of into the popular realm, and that was what gave you some language and understanding of what had happened to you. So when you read her story, when you saw her and so many other women, to Tanera Burke, what went through your mind initially? Was it, shock? Was it like Me Too, or like what was that feeling? and what ultimately led you to decide to speak up about your story?
I read on Twitter. I'll never forget that day. I remember jumping up and going, "Oh my God!" And I knew Harvey.
Yeah.
My ex-wife Christina worked with Harvey, and I was around him all the time. um, and I just thought there's something that Joseph Campbell talks about. He talks about going to the deepest, darkest, scariest place, and
Mm.
that's where you're going to find your jewel point, the thing
Mm.
that's going to give you the greatest gifts you could
Yeah.
ever given. And I had been sober for a long time, maybe 27, 3 years, over 3 years. So I was pretty clean and sober from alcohol and drugs. And I was going through like this thing because of my son being he was 3 years old around that time. And I could just see that I actually could give something very special to the world.
Yeah.
Um, little did I know that no other men were speaking out. Terry Crews was speaking out.
Right.
Uh, And I called up Liz Leonard from People Magazine, who was a friend of mine, who
Mm.
gone through two divorces, public divorces with me. And it was like the walking up and making amends with somebody during your sobriety is very difficult and very
Mm.
scary. But having an understanding of the roots of what it was that trauma is like a time traveler.
Yeah.
And it had caught me. And as soon as I was sober and I was able to see what it was clear.
Mm.
And because it was clear, I thought to Liz, if I could share this story and I could help others in a really big way, let's publish this. Let me tell you the story. I
Wow.
will try to get it out as best I can. Um, and we did. We sat down and she literally listened, and she's insightful,
Mm.
and I could tell you she was scared to put it out there for me.
Right.
Yeah, she was
Wow.
scared for me.
And I imagine, number one, I mean, what you've gone through, like I can just see different comments coming up, like people are identifying with what you're saying, like it's this is moving people. So you have accomplished your goal of um, getting a message out and changing people for the better and affecting people positively and helping them not feel alone. Like I can even see that in this small format with the comments that are coming up. And I I'm so thankful that you did decide to speak up. And I'm wondering, when you did speak up, when you did have People Magazine publish this article on a massive platform, um, what was that like for you? I know female survivors experience a lot of victim blaming and shaming. I imagine that's the same for men, but maybe from a little bit of a different angle. What was that like in your experience when you actually came forward?
I was making movies. I was making action movies in the most macho of macho movies with Bruce Willis and good friends of mine, very tough guys, really
Mm-hmm.
good guy.
Yeah.
And that was the scariest part, is that I wasn't going to be accepted anymore.
Yeah.
That they would question my sexuality.
Right.
They would question, why didn't I stop him? Like, why
Mm-hmm.
would I speak out?
Right.
Why would I do all these things? But and so when I did that, it was that when someone didn't acknowledge me was the hardest part, and
Right.
that happened a lot. And then I realized I wasn't alone. That all survivors, they just feel voiceless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rose is a very unique one. She's got an amazing voice.
Mm.
She doesn't identify. Well, she's told me she doesn't identify with shame,
Hmm.
and I fought tooth and nail to not to shame myself.
Right.
But
Right.
I had a great group of fellow SLAW members, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous,
Hmm.
and I moved from all the other anonymouses into
Yeah.
this one because I could feel this. It was like I was part of the Broken Hearts Club,
Right.
and as soon as I walked into this meeting, I was like, "Yeah, I have a broken heart like nobody's business, and
Yeah.
all my dreams were broken, and I just need to heal all this so that I don't carry it on to my little ones."
Mm.
Um, But the survivors, the girls from Me Too, they embraced me.
Mm,
I mean, I can't tell you how many times Rose just stood with me. She just was like, she was right there with me.
yeah.
And because I'm really good at certain things, I'm good at finding at you, and I'm good at that. I connect really
Mm.
well. I'm like a shaman with that world where I can kind of move everyone's places and help them find out where they need to go in the world and help
Yeah,
them find the
you are
courage
good
plan.
at that.
Yeah. So it was difficult, but my wife, she had a really hard time in the beginning. I mean, she had
Yep.
she literally had a, what do you call that one, an intervention.
Right.
Oh my god, because I started to get involved with snap. I started to look into these Catholic priests, and they had this divinity over their, and it was very similar, the divinity of Franco and the divinity of these priests. And when they were molested, they would put their divine right on it, and
Yeah.
it tracked all the way, this, it tracked all the way to the Pope, because Franco and the Pope, they took a picture together when this was
Wow.
all going. The Pope Francis and Franco Zeffirelli. And I thought, wow,
Hmm.
I mean, it's so obvious, right? Now,
Yeah.
one thing about Franco being my abuser is he's really famous, and he's done
Right.
about 4 different biographies. So
Hmm.
there's a lot that I learned about Franco during the course of
Hmm.
this. He was abused by a priest
Interesting.
when he was at an orphanage growing up in Florence.
Hmm.
He was granted Jesus of Nazareth by a pope. He was always part of that hierarchy.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I would love for you to maybe speak to that a little bit, because you shared something with me earlier about power dynamics, and I think that is something that's really important for people to understand. Is experiencing any form of abuse, it doesn't just mean that the person was physically violent, though that can be a part. And I would say that, assaulting somebody sexually is physically violent, but it's not always like beating somebody up. A lot of times, the reason it happens and that they're in a position to have it happen is because they're in this place of power. And he was close to the Pope, as you said. He was this amazing director who literally had control over parts of your career, even to taking your words from you in a job. Could you just maybe explain a little bit for those who might be unfamiliar with why power dynamics, why that's a thing, and why it's not just a physical beating somebody into submission?
Well, the power dynamics basically are that the individual has other things over you that they use to exploit your sex.
Yeah.
But it's really not about sex. It's all about power.
Right. Right.
These are not, people get very confused because they think that it's a sexual act.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's dominant. It's a domination of one's psyche and
Hmm.
soul. Um, so when someone has that kind of power over you, it's hard to address. I couldn't address what that was right away. It wasn't like, he was, I hate to say the word grooming, but he was grooming me throughout the time before that. They took me in the Vatican. They made sure that I saw his art. He
Hmm.
talked to me about being a great performer and the suffering of the artist. And I was a thespian. Like, I've trained really hard to
Sure.
that point. I wanted to be able to shine. He knew I wanted that.
Mm.
Look, I had no knowledge that Franco had done this before. He had done it before. Bruce Robinson had spoke about it, made a movie about it with Nell and I, um, and other survivors that came out to me and said the exact same thing had happened to me.
Wow.
Um, an acting teacher who basically told me that the same thing had happened to him.
Hmm.
Um, that was his way. It was a very common way.
Right.
Um, and you hear the dynamics of the casting couch. And so the power dynamics played out like it did with Rose.
Mm.
She just froze. And in that brief period of time, she physically couldn't stop Harvey.
Right.
I mean, I physically tried to stop Franco, but it was a very short time span.
Sure. And we
It
all
was,
go through, when we're experiencing trauma, there's, our body chooses what our response is. You know, it could be fight, flight, or freeze, but we don't get to choose that in the moment. Our body automatically does it. And more often than not, it's that freeze response, because our body assesses that that's the way it's going to keep us alive best. And I think so many people don't understand that. And so there's guilt of, why didn't you yell? Why didn't you run? Why didn't you fight? Your body overrides your mind in that moment and causes that freeze. And yeah, oh my gosh.
yeah. So he in the moment for me, it was the lack of violence.
Right,
That was what caused trauma.
right,
Not stopping,
right.
me not harming him.
Mm-hmm.
If that it just erupts your life.
Yes.
Like, life isn't supposed to be fractured like that. You're not supposed to have something come in. That's why survivors have a really difficult time identifying exactly who they are and what they are.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Well, we've talked about a lot of really heavy things, and I appreciate you sharing that experience of your life and just all the experiences that came after it. Like, truly, that is a brave thing to share, and it's an honor to be able to hear your story. I would love, before we get into some live Q&A, to maybe just switch the topic a little bit from some of the heaviness of trauma, and maybe talk about some of the things that you've learned. So we've had conversations before about how impactful it was for you to be able to support Ellen when she wasn't out, Ellen DeGeneres, and how she was able to be there for you in different moments. Um, and then ultimately, what I've heard you say over the last year or so as we've talked about this idea of survivor pride, and no longer feeling that shame and celebrating our survivorhood. Could you talk to us a little bit about your thoughts there?
Okay, so when I went through this experience, I really realized that I was going to fall into a dark hole. I needed to reach out, and I needed to talk to as many people that would talk to me. I
Yes.
reached out to SNAP. I reached out to Bishop's Accountability, and I had intense conversations with individuals. I learned so much about other male survivors and how their physical life um, plays out. I learned that it was the first time that the Pope had ever recognized that it wasn't a sin, that it
Mm,
was a crime.
mm,
It was a crime that was placed upon the individual, not a sin.
right, right.
It's a big difference. And that, as a Catholic,
Yeah, yeah.
it was releasing that I let go of my father's religion that he had raised me with. I
Mm,
accepted whatever anyone wanted to say about me. I'd pretty much said it all along for the last 20 years.
hmm,
I let go of being the macho guy that the other guys thought I was. I was me. I was more me than ever. I
wow,
took ownership of my story, and I shared it as much as I possibly could.
wow.
And I brought the courage to others so that
Yes.
they could make those changes in their life. I made changes with my wife so that when we had this intervention, she understood that I had made these shifts in my life, these changes in my life, because of the courage that I saw in others, and I learned that from Ellen, watching Ellen come out and share that with the world. She had everything you possibly could want, except love,
Mm,
and the ability to love someone publicly as
right,
herself.
right.
And when she made that choice, I mean, I'm sure she had a lot of reasons that I don't know, but I was part of it. And the big reason was when we would go to the red carpet
Mm-hmm.
and I would hold her, I was like, okay, let's go,
Mm-hmm.
let's go fool the world, which no, I didn't feel like
Right,
we were fooling. She didn't think we were fooling anyone, but we were holding
right.
hands, kissing on the red carpet.
Mm-hmm.
She had to say goodbye to whoever she was dating at the time. And that moment there was all this like just not allowing to be who you are.
Right.
And when, she did the puppy episode, which is the episode that she came out about being gay on, and Ellen, she came out in public at the same time.
Right. Right.
And it was tough. I mean, I was part of it. I couldn't perform because of my shame of
Mm.
my dyslexia. But they did the show, and then it became. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah, I'm still here. Can
Okay,
you
I
hear
can.
me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
I can't see you anymore. Are we off there?
No, we're still on air. I would say just go ahead and keep going. I can still see and
Okay.
hear you.
Yeah. So when I realized that when she came out, it was a very difficult thing for her to do. The whole world judged her for whatever they thought of whatever was going on,
Right.
and she lost her show that she had. Um, she and then she, it's like they tried to get rid of her, or she
Right.
tried to get rid of herself, and then we see her on this TV show, and she makes people laugh. She
Yep.
brings joy to everybody every single day. And it's because she took ownership of who she was. She was able to finally just be all of her,
Right.
authentically who she was. We are all made, we are all unique, we are all gifted with certain things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was finally found her bliss. She
Right.
sacrificed everything in her life so that she could have love and true love and self-love. And great things came to her. And since I've shared, amazing things have happened in my life. I have a
Mm.
beautiful, I don't know if you heard her crying a little while ago, a little baby girl, 2 months old, Lily Joe.
She's so cute.
My wife loves me more than ever. She
Mm.
accepts me for all that I've done in my life and who I am.
Mm.
I'm constantly told that I'm a good father,
Mm.
and life is great because of
Mm.
the freedom that was given to me by speaking my truth. It wasn't so much about being in the public eye. It wasn't, that was tough. But
Right.
I'm also the guy who's been divorced from Christina Applegate, who's very uber famous, and
Right.
my wife is uber famous, and Janet Kramer.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always been in the public eye
Right.
in certain ways, and gossip columns and all that kind of thing. So that was not harm. I didn't, like, people would tell me, like, on the sites, they were like, oh, he hasn't worked in a long time. I was like, I like made 5 movies in a row. I'm on a television series. Like, I'm Jonah Hex on Legends of Tomorrow. You guys, oh God,
Yeah. Yeah.
they
My
just don't know. Not everyone knows everything about everyone.
right.
You know?
And I took a quote from something you sent me the other day, and I think it really encapsulates what you're saying here, just about finding this new ending for yourself. It's when we deny our story, it defines us. But when we take ownership of the hardest parts of our story, we get to write a new ending. And uh, I just, that was so meaningful. And maybe you have it, maybe I didn't copy it down right. Do you have different words there in front of you?
No.
No, that's the quote.
That's pretty close to Brene Brown.
It's good. It's good. And I love how you have, as you've owned your story, you've been able to let in more joy into your life. And we had Levon Proverbs speak last week, and she was talking about how you can only heal to the point that you allow pleasure into your life. You can only experience pleasure to the point where you allow healing. And just to see how much it took to share your story, but once you have the transformation that's happened in your life, truly, truly powerful. And yeah, I guess before we get into some live questions, do you have anything that you would want to share with people, just like a message you would want the survivors listening to hear from you?
Well, since we started out talking about religion and about God and
Yeah.
what God that was brought up with, the God that I was raised with, and the way my father gave me an understanding of something greater than me
Mm.
was was compartmentalized in Catholicism, but it wasn't. It, the God that I've come to know is a loving God
Mm,
that is always there for me, has always been there through all of it. That God was with and is with Ellen.
mm,
That God is in and with my children. That God is a loving God. The world is difficult,
right,
tough, and can be
right,
brutal.
right.
But the understanding that there's something greater in me gives me hope and meaning. And as long as I have courage,
Mm,
I can move into the next part of the story that I'm supposed to tell.
that's
And that's
beautiful.
it's only because of that God that I got rid of. He's no
Right.
longer got
Yeah.
rid of the exterior of that God and put that God in here.
Yeah.
And
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. And I think a lot of survivors find solace in that knowing because representations of God have been so warped. And yeah, thank you for sharing that.
yeah, and you know what? Actually, one thing that the when I all the male survivors, there's a sadness. There's an incredible sadness, um, and that sadness is because they don't have a voice. They lose their voice. They
Right.
can't get justice. They can't. I mean, there is so many men out there who have been abused who just can't speak out about it, and
Yes.
it holds them in like a prison.
Right.
Because I had this experience with Ellen and I watched her go through it, I know that it is the same dynamics, whatever
Mm,
dynamics that may be, but speaking out and coming out are
right.
very similar. And that the one thing that the gay community had LGBT community had was pride.
Mm,
And that's what I want to be able to is to be proud of who you are no matter what had happened to you.
right.
It doesn't define who you are.
Right. Wow. That's really powerful. Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. John, this has been such a moving interview. I mean, truly moving. I feel like you've bared your soul to us. And um, I know as a survivor myself, there are so many pieces I could identify with. And we hear from a lot of female survivors, and that's great. But I think it's so important to have a voice of a male survivor as well. And you've represented that so beautifully. Um, we're going to come back in just a minute and do some live questions because people have been dropping those in the comments. But before we do that, I would just love to encourage anybody who is tuning in right now. If you want to continue helping Courage 365 support survivors to offer free resources, you can be a part of our ally donor team by going to courage365.org/donate. And by becoming a monthly donor, you can actually help us give resources to survivors who are in need. And if you've really been moved by this conversation tonight, knowing all the things that can be offered to survivors, we'd love for you to help support our mission with that. And we want to thank one of our sponsors, Sojourners, who has helped us have this conversation tonight and all of the conversations during the 30 Days of Courage. So we have a quick message from Sojourners, and then we're going to jump into some live questions with Jonathan.
My God believes that I am beloved.
My God is not a Republican or a Democrat.
She breaks through stained glass ceilings and brings down walls.
My God is not afraid to call out racism.
My God heals without worrying about insurance.
My God was a refugee.
Was an immigrant.
And wasn't white.
My God is with the lonely.
Doesn't care about my tattoos.
And doesn't care if I'm 23
or 63.
My God commanded us to care for this earth.
A mi Dios no le importa si no hablo inglés.
My God is love.
Is love.
Is love.
Is love.
Is love.
Is love.
Es amor.
Is love.
Is love.
Is love.
Yes, yes. Beautiful. Well, thank you again, Jonathan, for speaking with us. And I have a stack of questions here, so we might have to do them a little bit rapid fire. Maybe you can give us the short answer to some of these so we can get to as many as possible. But yeah, so we have one from Elizabeth, and she says, I have loved ones who don't want me to speak out because they don't want me hurt. I want to speak out. Any thoughts to share? What would you say to someone in a situation like that?
Just speak out to them. You know, if it's something that would harm you, you don't want to harm your world any more than it's been harmed. But speaking to them and getting to your truth is what you really need to do. There may not, you need to stop the harm from others. But the world doesn't treat survivors well, but you have to get through it. So if you have the courage to get through it and you have support, then you should do it.
Thank you for that. Kathy says, how can we better support male survivors?
Support them, literally. Like people, they say that and then they don't support. They just don't support. I don't need anyone. I don't need anyone to feel sorry for me. I don't need anyone to think anything. They just need to give me the opportunities that they had given me before. Those doors are closed because they're scared to actually have these hard conversations. So people just need to support survivors and just allow that to happen. If there was more courage in institutions to have these hard conversations, we wouldn't be so polarized. We'd be able to have wholeness because that's who we are. We're both, like we're whole.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Okay, here's one from Lisa. She says, one, did you go through any form of depression, and how does fatherhood affect your well-being?
Yeah, I was suicidal after my abuse. Fatherhood has made me really be able to see the inner child, see the child, see my child, and want to not cause any harm to my children. So I healed.
Wow. Yeah. I love that one of your motivations for healing was your children and not passing on trauma. That's such a beautiful purpose in that. Yeah. Yeah. And if anybody watching is experiencing depression or suicidal thoughts, if you're in imminent danger, please do call the police. And in other cases, you can go to courage365.org, and we have a need help tab, and it has a list of hotlines that you can call if you need some help, if you're experiencing significant depression or suicidal thoughts. There's other supportive blogs and websites there, but we don't want you to suffer alone. You're not alone. And if you need help, please do reach out for support. Okay, got another question. This one's from Elizabeth. It says, do you think it is important to get to the roots of trauma?
Yes. Absolutely. You need to get into I did a lot of EDMR. I think that's right. The letters.
Yep. I got you. I'm dyslexic too. I got you.
Yeah. Brain spotting. Those things are really kind of help me put everything together and get to the root of that trauma. And then it was easier to identify why I did what I did throughout my life that I felt ashamed from. And I was able to compartmentalize and understand each one of those character defects as I put in my program, and then I was able to, put them aside and see me in one layer after the next, and the trauma was just waiting for me.
Wow!
I was able to see it once I got through all of that.
Wow! Yeah, it kind of put together some pieces. That makes a lot of sense. I would say that is the same for me as well, working through trauma. When you find the root system, it kind of explains so much. We've just got a few more questions, but one is, have you gotten pushback for speaking about an abuser? I'm an average Jane, but I am experiencing threatened, I'm sorry, dyslexia moved there for me too. Let me start that one over. Have you gotten pushback for speaking out about an abuser? I am an average Jane, but I'm experiencing threats of civil suits and am convicted from a convicted abuser. I don't know if you could hear that through my dyslexic stumbling, but hopefully you understand the gist of that question.
Yeah, well, it's everyone's different. You got to figure out what is safe, what is not safe. Speaking out is difficult. You're going to lose your voice, and you have to find a new voice. Whatever that is, yet there's going to be a fight.
Right.
Abusers are able to have a voice as well, and they may not. Here's the one thing, and me and Ashley have had this discussion. The abuser may not really realize what they have done. Like Franco, did Franco know that he destroyed, a part of myself? I don't know if he did. I always felt like he felt me. But he was going through his own thing. Like he gave his sexuality up to someone so they wouldn't be put on the firing squad during World War II. So the dynamic was a little different. So I saw my abuser as someone different once I heard he was abused by a priest, and that he had, in one of his biographies, I learned, he went through a lot of trauma himself.
Right.
But not to say you're going to get pushed back the whistleblowers are always Serpicos, the people that actually speak up against organizations they're met with resistance and a great deal of it.
Right.
You're going to find your support team. You have to have a strong support team. My program, I have a group therapy. I had therapists. I have an incredible wife, very supportive family through all of it. Make sure you have the same.
Right. No, that's really wise. And, I think it is an interesting question. Do abusers know how much they have harmed? And I think that probably depends on the abuser. It doesn't take away from the pain, however, whether they knew the extent or not, it was still, they knew they shouldn't have done it. And also when we're speaking up against them, you're so right. You have to have that support system because abusers will come back at you strong. And like with this civil suit, those types of things, those are scary things, but they can be gotten through. Many survivors have survived through those things, but you need that support system. Make sure you have a good therapist. Make sure you have a good community around you, like Johnathon said. And that, I think that's really the way you make it through those things for sure. Okay, one other question here, and this is from Lisa. She says, do you think all of the drug abuse and overdoses among young male actors has to do with sexual abuse by people in power in the industry?
No, not all of them.
Yeah.
With some of them.
Yeah.
I've witnessed a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a deep question, and the extent of the abuse and the extent of just other pressures in that industry, that's a lot to hold.
I found that dyslexia is probably it's shame.
Yeah.
Shame is the thing that causes all those overdoses and hatred of oneself.
Right.
Shame. So shame is separate than guilt. So shame is who you are, but guilt is something you had done. So when people start, like, I put it in context with my little boy. He plays Little League. He got the ball was hit to the third baseman. The third baseman was allowed to touch the base, and he was out before he got there because he couldn't have got there any faster.
Right.
For him, when he got so upset because he was out, but there was nothing he could have done.
Right.
That's shame. That's shame. You have to be careful that those are places of shame.
Right.
Like, why is he shaming himself here? Like, he's not guilty of not running hard enough. He's not.
Right.
He didn't do anything wrong. It's who he is. So, so that's what I see when anyone really abuses themselves so much. They actually blame themselves and hate themselves for things that they are.
Wow. And therapy can be one of those great tools to help you work through that shame so you don't have to continue on that path. And Jonathan, I have just one last question, and this one's from me, and that is, how do you define courage?
Well, it's being scared of something and doing it anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And having to face that fear.
Well, you have certainly shown us another level of courage tonight, and really, really appreciate you being on the show. I know this has touched so many people's hearts, and it will continue to as we have the replays. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for spending this time with us this evening.
Ashley, I can't see you anymore, but I love you. I think you are monumental. I think you're going to change the world, and I'm going to keep giving you as much as I possibly can. You just keep harnessing it and finding ways to get this goodness out to the world that, you know, that we both know. The love that is inside each and every individual that is watching this, they need to be able to hold that and love that and bring that out into the world. We need more of that. We need more Ashley Easters.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I think we need more Johnathon Schaech. So let's just change the world together, okay? All right. Well, I will check in with you in a bit. I know you can't see me, but I have a few announcements for the rest of our audience. But thank you so much, Jonathan. Everybody else, I have a couple of quick announcements for you. Let me see. First of all, we, wasn't that just amazing? Why don't we just take a deep breath for a second? Let's take a deep breath. Just let it out slow. Just hold that message in your heart. That was so powerful what we just had there. But on a little bit of a different note, I have seen so many of you in the Courage 365 Facebook group showing your self-affirmation vision boards for the challenge for the first week. And I am just so happy that we get to announce our first winner. And hopefully they are tuning in. If not, I'll be sure to tag them in a post after. But our winner for this week's challenge, and you'll be winning the book about dreams from Calm. This is Joy Loveheart. You are our winner. Congratulations. So glad that you joined the challenge, and I'll be contacting you in a bit to make sure we can get that for you. You'll also be getting a copy of my book, The Courage Coach, a practical, friendly guide on how to heal from abuse. So we'll be sending that to you. And everybody else that didn't win, never fear, we have another challenge for you for this week. And this challenge is the self-care challenge, okay? So what we're going to ask you to do this week is really simple. We want you to find some time to practice self-care. So that could be baking some brownies. That could be having a socially distant drink with a friend. That could be taking a long nap or reading a book that you haven't given yourself time to read. That could be attending an outdoor sporting event or taking a nature walk. I don't care what it is. It doesn't need to fit my version of what self-care is. It needs to be fitting in your version of self-care. But what I want you to do is I want you to take a picture of you or the thing that you're doing, participating in self-care. I want you to take a picture of that, post that in the Courage 365 Facebook group, and use the hashtag Courage365 Week 2. And the person who wins this challenge is going to get a copy of Leah Remini's book, Troublemaker, and also a copy of my book. Let me move it to the side so you can see it, The Courage Coach. So that is going to be the prize for next week. This is going to be really exciting. And of course, if you participate in all 4 weeks of the challenge, then you will have an opportunity to be entered into our drawing for the grand prize. And the grand prize includes my book, The Courage Coach. It includes these My Therapy cards, and it includes a year-long subscription to the Calm app. I'm telling you, I'm not a spokesperson for Calm, but they have changed my life. I love their meditations. I listen to their sleep stories every night while I'm going to bed. So this is the grand prize. So make sure that you keep up with the challenges for this coming week. And just one more time, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors who made the 30 Days of Courage Challenge possible. That is Sojourners, SNAP, Survivors Network of Those Abused by Priests, the Imago Dei Fund, and of course, all of our individual donors who help make this possible. If you want to join our team and help us serve survivors to a greater capacity, just go to courage365.org/donate, and you can become a monthly donor as well. We would appreciate that so very much. And don't forget to check out the post that'll be coming up in the Facebook group in just a minute or two. Maybe it's already popped up with more details about this week's challenge. I love you all. I can't wait to see you next week. Have a great night and live with courage. Mwah. Bye.